Is it? Now it is.
It is now.
Now it is recording. Okay. All righty then. I'm going to start with a couple disclaimers myself. My preference is, in this setting at least, to answer questions when I'm done. But if something you think really needs to be addressed, write it down so you don't forget it. 'Cause I do want to address it, but I have a flow I'm going to be going through here. If during my talk you really want to ask something, then you can put it in the chat, and I probably won't be looking at the chat, so I'll be looking at other stuff. But Dustin can look at it, and he can let me know if it's something that seems like it would be a really good idea to address it at that moment. I'd be happy to do that. I'll leave that up to him for that purposes. Second thing is my discussion I'm having this morning on the what did you call it? When you sent it out, invitations, history of salvation, something. I don't remember what you did. You're muted, Dustin.
Oh. Sorry. Yeah, I titled it God and Man, the Plan of Salvation.
God and Man, the point.
The Plan of Salvation.
Oh, the Plan of Salvation. Got it. Okay, got it. Appreciate that. So anyway, that's the title, I guess. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. But in the beginning here, I just want to let you know that I taught world religions on a college level for 27 years. And I would always tell the students that when I was hired by the dean to teach the class, I was told that my own particular religious persuasion wasn't to be the focus of the class. And he said there was a man who was teaching the class before I took over, and that he would use it as a pulpit for his particular religion and try to convert people to his religion. And he said that's not what the purpose is. He says, I'm assuming if you're going to teach world religions, you probably have some ideas on religion and where you're have been persuaded to. He said, but that's not really what the class is about. So you should keep that to yourself. And he said, if you can do that, then I'll hire you to teach a class. I said, I can do that, not a problem. And so every once in a while, actually quite often, be a better way to put it, students would ask me what my religion was. And I would always give them the same answer. My religion is important to me, but it's also private during this semester. Because let's say, for example, I was I don't care, a Muslim, and you were a Christian. There's at least a small likelihood that how you listen to me during the semester would be different, because you may have a sort of a hidden animosity, or your ears might be closed to the things I have to say, because you think I'd be presenting things in a biased form. And so I said I prefer not to do anything that keeps you from hearing what I have to say this semester. I'm not ashamed of my beliefs. I'm happy to share them, but I will only do that on the last day of class, and only if asked. If that doesn't happen, you won't know, unless you go talk to other students who've done that in the past, and they did ask, and I did answer. But if they did ask, then what I would I would tell them, but I would also then, before I tell them, say, what do you think I am? Where do you think I fit in all this? And the number one answer was that I was a Taoist. That's what they thought I was. And the number two answer was that I was a Pentecostal Christian. So those were the two things, and I'm not either of those. And so I felt like, well, I must have done a pretty good job keeping my own personal ideas out of it. You can't, completely keep them out, but I thought I was doing a fairly good job if they were not able to nail it on the head. So anyway, that's how I'm also approaching today's presentation. I'm teaching you about what the Bible teaches about salvation. Okay, my goal here isn't to convert anybody. My goal here is to give you information that I believe correctly represents what is taught in the Bible. That's it. Now, if like I said, if it's something that you're interested in, Dustin or I would be happy to talk to you about it. But the goal is just simply to give you information. And if we had someone, let's say from the Mormons, come in and do a presentation, they might have a goal to convert you to Mormonism. That's perfectly fine. This forum here is perfectly fine to have presenters want to convert others, whether it be to a religion or away from religion to atheism. Either of those things are fine. Though everyone is free to have that presentation. The only thing we require is if you do a presentation, you have to stay for questions afterwards. You have to answer and interact with the people in the room who seek answers from you. So we don't do what I used to call guerrilla teaching, or come down out of the hills, shoot everybody up and then run back and hide up in the hills. You have to stay and let people do that. And I used to do that the same thing when I would teach critical reasoning or ethics classes, and the students had to do a presentation on some topic, and it would be a topic that was there's going to be some arguments on it, sometimes some very passionate arguments about, but they had to do their presentation, and it had to be they had to stand up in front of the class and answer the questions that people had. So that's all we ask that people do. So anyway, having said all that, I'm going to go ahead and I think you're going to let me share screens. Yes, Dustin?
Yes, sir. Yeah, you should have the capability of green button down at the bottom middle.
Well, my button is not green, but
Oh, there you are.
I can do that. Okay. So you can see my screen now? Yes? No? Maybe?
Yep, we're
Okay,
seeing
very
it.
good. All right. So this is something that I put together, I don't know how long ago, at least 30 years ago. So I've used this in my world religion classes for years. And it's overview of the four major Eastern religions, and then overview of the three major Western religions. And although there's classical Hebrewism and modern Judaism, which they are enough different than I put them as two different religions here actually, although a lot of people would disagree with me having done that. But and then I looked at these, they're compared based on there's the name of the religion, there's the origin, where it came from, and when, the problem. And this is one thing that's important because world religions, by definition, have to have as a part of what they of their teachings that there's a problem in the universe. Something's gone wrong. Here we have ancient Hinduism. The problem was separation from the will and power of the gods, several gods. Modern Hinduism, Maya, illusion. Illusion is everywhere. Buddhism, desire. There's the problem of the universe. We have desire. Taoism, man is out of sync with the Tao. The energy is not syncing up together. So every religion has a problem, and then every religion has a solution to that problem. Here's what we're offering. This is what our religion is offering as the fix to that problem. And so they each have one of those. And then I also had on here the goal, what they were looking for as far as if they did everything that the religion wanted them to do, what was the end goal here? Like in ancient Hinduism, is an unnamed state of bliss after death. Modern Hinduism, moksha, release from the wheel of existence. Buddhism, nirvana, etc. So that's what this is. In general, I'm going to be talking today, though, about Christianity and how it presents the problem of the universe and the solution to that problem. in Christianity. And I could have done, it says here, classical Hebraism and modern Judaism. I could have on here, except it wouldn't have fit on 2 pages. I could have put classical Christianity and modern Christianity, because there are sometimes some pretty distinct differences in classical Christianity and modern Christianity. But I didn't usually go through that with the students when I taught the course, unless they asked about the questions about it. Well, what about did the early Christians in the first century, second century, did they believe and teach the same things that people do today in the Methodist Church? If they, ask questions, I would certainly answer them if I had the answers. So I don't have all the answers, but I would do my best to answer those. So this is what we're going to be focusing on today, is the problem and the solution as presented in Christianity. And the Christianity founded upon the person and work of Jesus of Nazareth, who died in 30 AD. And the problem being separation from God because of Adam's sin and personal sin. And the solution being faith in the atoning work of Jesus, the sacrificial Lamb of God. And then I also have, I forgot to mention, I also have in here the scriptures that are used to show these things. And the goal is heaven and or new heavens and the new earth. Most people that I talk to who identify as Christians, they say that the goal is heaven, but in fact, if you look at the New Testament, heaven is a temporary stopover until there is a new heaven and new earth that is created, and that will be the permanent dwelling place. Although we're not going to really get into that today. So, okay, so I am going to stop right here, because this is before I get into the real stuff I'm talking about. Does anyone have any questions about this? This is available for you if you want to download it. Dustin can get a copy to you. So go ahead.
So your distinction between classical Hebraism and modern Judaism, it would seem to me that a lot of the stuff that is true of classical Hebraism can also be said of modern Judaism. Like, like they do still rely upon the Torah as well as the rabbinical writings and the oral traditions. They are still looking for a future restoration of Israel. It seems like a lot of the stuff that is true of classical Hebraism would also be true of modern Judaism.
Well, I think
I
this says, the problem is essentially the same. Where it was founded, though, is different. And you are correct in that modern Judaism has many of the same doctrines. However, it has some distinct differences. And I will say this: we could take modern Judaism and break it up into probably 4 different subcategories. And one of those subcategories would be the most conservative of Jews today, and they would still hold to these, except they would not hold to the need to have animal sacrifices brought to the temple done by priests to cover their sins, simply because there's no temple for that to be done in. And so there are a few differences. And in practice, again, although if you ask Jews from across the spectrum, from the left to the right in the modern Judaism, you would typically find that there is, except for the far right, you would typically find that when you ask them a question about what does your religion teach, there will be a tendency to quote from this on the right down here. Again, I can't just highlight the right thing. The midrash or the oral traditions. There's a tendency for them to do that more than you would with the very, very conservative ones, although they would too, but not nearly as much as the modern, more left-leaning Jews. But yeah, there's certainly going to be overlaps, just like there is with Christianity. There's overlaps from classical to modern, just like there is with Hinduism from classical to modern. There's certainly overlaps. There's things that are the same, but there are some things that, to me, in my mind, and this is just my chart, in my mind, that make them enough different to distinguish them as specifically as a different way to take care of the problem. Because that's, to me, that's, I used to use the illustration of having a flag, just like an army has a flag, this is what we stand for. We stand for whatever. Their flag would have something different on it for a Vedic Hindu army than a modern Hindu army, because they have some distinctive beliefs, and most religions, and even the sub divisions of those religions, they want you to know how they are different from the other traditions. So if like Dustin was saying earlier, if we had some followers of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints come and do a presentation, they would likely want to make sure that we were aware of how they are different from classical Christianity, that they follow further revelation. They have a different views on X, Y, and Z. Usually they want to show, to point out those distinctions. They don't highlight them, but they point them out so that we know that they're not like everybody else. So, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, but I guess what I was saying, like if you scroll down, like it seems like, I don't know, like if I were a Jew, I think I would identify, I would still like, I would see myself as basically the continuation of classical Hebraism. And so, like, even though it would be true, yes, I agree with the oral traditions and the rabbinical writings, etc. Like, I would also still have a really important, like, a really kind of like the Torah would still be central, and like the future restoration of Israel would still be central to me. And like certain, so I'm just saying like some of the stuff that's up in the classical Hebraism category could also be brought down to the modern Judaism category. That's all I was saying.
Okay, and I get that. I do. And to be honest with you, I have over the years spoken to many modern Hindus, and they would say the same thing. They'd say, "Well, yeah, we still hold to the Vedas. We still follow the Vedas, especially the Rig Veda, blah blah blah." They would still say that, but their theology that they would espouse doesn't come from the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda doesn't teach reincarnation, so they have to get that from the later documents, and so they can say that because they don't want to. People don't want to say, "Oh, I'm following a new offshoot," because then people say, "Oh yeah, that." So you're just some new progressive point that's coming out of this religion. They to have some sort of gravitas. There's preference to say my doctrines go all the way back to the beginning. That gives them a greater gravitas, and so that's true of because I've never spoken to any Hindus who have their theology based solely on the Vedas. They just don't. They're most of their doctrines actually are from the Upanishads, and those doctrines are new doctrines that didn't exist before, before 500 BC. They just weren't there in their writings. So, but I see what you're saying, and I agree there are overlaps. And what you said there, that if you were a Jew, you would say that you still hold to the classical Hebraism. And even today, if I were to talk to a very someone who is Jewish from a liberal perspective, they would say that because they don't want to say, oh, old time religion of Judaism, I don't like anymore. I'm a follower of this new Judaism. They wouldn't say that because it sounds like they're tossing out the old timey religion, but in practice, uh, they hold the oral traditions far more than they do to the actual Torah. So that's all. Okay. And I'd be happy to talk about that further if you like, but I kind of want to get into my other stuff here. So let me stop sharing that. And I'm going to go back to, well, look at that. I see Neil showed up. And Adam. Okay, so let me share this other document. This is the one that Dustin posted on the site. And again, this is just I tried really hard in preparing this to not be to have my theology left out as much as possible, but I'm not saying it's not present. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm trying. I mostly try to give scripture and let people decide what they want, what it says. But so these are some of the main points that I have when I talk about essentially the history of and this is something I wrote many years ago. It's called A Broad Look at How Things Stand, How They Got Here, and What the Future Looks Like Concerning God and His Relationship with mankind. And this is from the perspective of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. So this is essentially what is I believe is objectively taught in those texts. So we'll start out back here, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on any of these things. If there's some of these points that you'd like to ask questions about further, that's perfectly fine. You make a note of them, and I'll address them afterwards. And afterwards too, it doesn't have to be just me talking. I can shut up and you guys can talk, and you can ask each other these questions. It doesn't have to be me. Anybody can talk in these things. But the Hebrew Bible presents that in the beginning everything was good. The creation accounts at the end of each of the days of creation, it says, and it was good. It was good. It was good. It was good. And so it was the universe was good. That was the primary quality of the universe. It was full of goodness. But then that goodness, like it says here, there was sin in the Garden of Eden, and the relationship that God had with mankind at that time, just Adam and Eve, was shattered because they were told not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they did, and they ended up being chased out of the garden. It says here, God sent them forth from the Garden of Eden. Once he was taken, he drove out the man and he placed at the east of Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep them from the way of the tree of life. So there was a separation. There was certainly not a physical separation, because the God of the Old Testament is omnipresent. He's everywhere, but he drove them out of the place where he created them. So there was a separation from that place. And he did some other things too. Originally, he gave dominion to mankind over other living creatures. He gave essentially a man dominion over the entire earth. He says there, let us make God in our own image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over the earth, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So they had dominion, they had authority over them. I don't think that means that Adam could walk up to a fish in a lake and say, "Here, swim on over here so I can pick you up and eat you." I don't know if that goes that far, but they did have dominion over them. They were given authority over them. And so and then it said same thing text here in 128, he gave them dominion over the things. And then in Psalm it says, thou madest him to have dominion over the works of thy hands, and put all things under his feet. And so again, all things are under the dominion of mankind. And then Luke, the quote from the New Testament, behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Now, this is Jesus sending his disciples. He's telling them they have power to tread on serpents and scorpions and all over all power of the enemy. So they had that too at that time, but that's because Jesus gave them to it at that moment. And but otherwise, the rest of the people on the planet originally had dominion over the earth, but something happened. According to 2 Corinthians 4:3, it says, if our gospel is hid to them that are lost, what did I do here? I messed that up. It is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is in the image of God, who is the image of God, should shine on them. So here he's saying that there is a God of this world. So that, and he's not talking about himself, and he's not talking about Jesus. He's talking about a God of this world. And what's this God done? He's blinded the minds of those which believe not. So the general understanding is he's talking about Satan, that he has blinded the minds of the unbeliever. And then he says here in Ephesians 2, in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So in time past, when God after the fall, there was a prince of the power of the air. So there was this spirit that worked in the world, and it worked in the children of disobedience, which was most of them. And then he says here, Jesus says, when he's discussing with the Jewish leaders, he says, you are of your father the devil. So he calls them children of the devil. And then he says here, we know that we are from God, and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. So this makes it pretty clear that although there was originally mankind had dominion over the world, and originally mankind had a close relationship with God, once they got kicked out, they also entered into a world in which Satan had dominion. So their dominion was gone because of that. And not only that's all external to them, but not only that, it says all flesh was corrupted. And he says here that he says to Timothy that they may come from their senses and escape from the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will. So before a person becomes a Christian, they are in the snare of the devil, and they have been captured by the devil to do his will, according to Paul, and what he said to Timothy. Ephesians 2:2, you were dead in your trespasses and sins, whence you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. So again, that's true of everybody. The average Joe on the street, that's their status. They follow the prince of the power of the air. Romans 16, but God be thanked that ye were servants of sin, but you have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered to you. It's a misprint there, delivered to you. So he's talking to Christians that they had, before they were Christians, they were servants of sin. That was their status in life. They were servants of sin. And again, if I were to talk to somebody, because I see it all the time in Facebook, when people say, well, there was just one on just yesterday, do you think that human beings are good? And there are a lot of different questions unanswered. And based on what Paul has to say, at least, they were at one point, but not anymore, because they've been handed over to a new boss. And this new boss is not the same as the old boss. This new boss wants to ensnare them and enslave them to sin. And that's what happened according to Paul. And then he says here, verse 6, chapter 6 in Genesis, this is right before the flood. He says, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And this is a statement about what is going on in all human beings that were alive on the planet at that time. And of course, we don't know for sure, but I did some slight research into it many years ago, and I came to the conclusion that there were probably at least several million human beings on the earth when the flood came. And it says here that the wickedness of man was great in his heart, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Just like, Dustin, his daughters, they're sweet girls. They're nice. But if a person's not saved, he's saying, hey, every imagination in their heart is only evil continually. They're not always evil, are they, Dustin? No. There's times when they're good. But he says he's talking about the interior of them, that every imagination of the thoughts of their heart was evil continually. And it says he repented that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him to his heart. He decided he's going to just destroy the whole lot of them. And he could have certainly done that. And that's a question that I've had. Well, why didn't he just flood the whole earth, kill everybody, and then start over? Well, he could have done that, but he decided to keep 8 people. He could have just started over. He created Adam and Eve, but he could have just created a new Adam and Eve and started over. Or he could have just said, I'm just going to let this planet go its merry way, and I'm going to go to a different galaxy and put a new Adam and Eve in a different planet in a different solar system. Could have done that too. But he didn't. He saved 8 people from that flood. And then finally here he says, I see another law, Paul says, I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. And this is important because this is Paul talking about himself. So he's a Christian, but he says, even though he used to be a servant of sin, but now he's obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered to him. But even then, he still has sin in his members. So something happened to all human flesh. And what he says it happened is there's a law of sin is in all human flesh. And so there was a corruption that occurred to mankind's flesh also, all people. And then on top of that too, says here in Genesis 3 that, why do I do that? That he said, when he tossed them out of the garden, he said, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow thou shalt eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall bring forth to thee. Thou shalt eat the herb of it. And so he essentially sent I don't know how or why or how it all happened, but there was, he brought corruption to the earth, which wasn't there before. And he says here in Romans, Paul says, the earnest expectation of the creature, and he's talking here about non-humans, they wait for the manifestation of the sons of God, for the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who subjected the same in hope, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of the corruption of the into the glorious liberty of the children of God. So there is a bondage of corruption that's in all of life on this planet. So Adam's sin and what God did to the planet because of that changed everything. And it says here, like I said in Genesis 6 with the flood, he says, the earth was also corrupt before God. The earth was filled with violence. God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh has corrupted his way upon the earth. So essentially, we have a corrupt planet now. From Adam and afterwards, from there on out, there is a corrupt planet full of corrupt people. And they have, all these corrupt people are under the dominion of a corrupt, powerful spiritual entity, Satan. Okay. And again, if you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm just saying, if people in my class said, I don't believe that, and I said, that's fine. You don't have to. I'm not telling you have to. I'm just reporting to you what the text says. If you can say, no, I don't agree. Oh, that's fine. I don't agree with some stuff in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, it doesn't change anything. I just say I don't agree with that. And it's perfectly fine to say I don't agree with it. What I don't like is people trying to go in and changing the texts or try to reinterpreting the texts to make it fit what they believe. To me, that's disrespectful to the text. So let the text say what it says, and just say, I don't agree. I just don't. I think that's wrong. I think Paul's wrong in this, and it's perfectly fine to say that in this space that we have here in Torn, that I think Paul was wrong. I think he was totally wrong. So, okay. So that being the case, he let mankind go its own way. After several generations, God judged mankind, destroyed all but 8. He was so he sent the flood, sent all but 8. They were killed. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and it wasn't because Noah was perfect. It wasn't. As we read later, if you look at what happened with Noah after the flood, he had some flaws. So did all the people that went on the boat with him. They had their flaws. So it wasn't because they were perfect. It's just that he found grace in the eyes of the Lord. That means the Lord decided to show grace to him. And so we go down here. He destroyed it with water. And then Acts 17, this is an extremely important verse in all of this discussion today. Acts 17, Paul is discussing, he's at this point, he's sort of like giving a speech. He says, God hath made the world and all the things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing that he giveth all life and breath and all things, and hath made of one blood all nations of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might find him, feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. And then he's talking to this whole thing, he's talking to the folks there from Athens, but he says that as certain as also of your own poets have said, for we are, and then he quotes, for we are his offspring. So for as much then as we're the offspring of God, we ought not to think that our Godhead is like unto gold or silver, stone or graven art. Basically saying you're worshiping God in these idols is dumb. That's what he's saying, because he's everywhere. He's not just in this little idol here. But he's making it very clear that he says in here that he appointed peoples, which is something that I don't hear people talk about ever, is that he appointed the bounds of their habitation. And there's a couple other texts, I'm not going to go into it today because it's really not relevant, but a couple of texts would say basically, God decided where certain groups of people were going to live, whole families, whole nations of people. He set their boundaries. You guys are going to be here, and this group's going to be here. But he said that they should seek the Lord, if haply they might feel after him and find him. So he made it possible for them to feel after him and find them if they wanted to. Okay? But, and he also says here, we are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that you should turn from your vanities to the living God, who in times past suffered all nations to walk their own ways. So he let them go their own ways. All the peoples of the earth. He said, okay, go about your business. And even though he did, and they were doing evil and were under the dominion of Satan, nevertheless, he left not himself without a witness, and that he did good and gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness. So he still did kind things for human beings. For basically everybody, he still said, okay, I'll still be nice to you. You guys have rejected me, and you're evil, and you're under Satan, but I'll still do nice things to you. But he gave then special revelation to some individuals. Okay, I don't know how, it doesn't say, but Abel knew, that Cain brought the fruit of the ground offering to the Lord, and Abel brought the firstlings of his flock. The Lord had respect to Abel and his offering, but Cain, he didn't for his, because he didn't bring an animal. Somehow, Abel knew that he should bring a sacrifice of an animal. And Cain either didn't know or he didn't care, and he brought just offering from the ground, plants for that. And God didn't like it. I don't know how they knew that. I really have no clue. Scripture doesn't say. And if Scripture doesn't say, I'm not going to weigh in on what the truth of the matter is. But he did speak to Noah, and he told Noah, hey, the world has gone to a hell in a handbasket, but I'm going to save you and your family. So he spoke that to him. He didn't speak that to anybody else, as far as we know. He didn't tell somebody over in China or somebody down in South America, oh, I want you to build an ark also. He only saved 8 people. Everybody else, he let them go off into destruction. So he did give him special revelation. And the word revelation simply means an uncovering. So this stuff, when you have revelation from God, it's things that you don't know unless God tells you. You just don't know. If you like right now, I let's say, okay, there was a girl that first girl I ever had a crush on when I was in 2nd grade. Do you know her name? No, you don't. Can you find it out? No, you can't. The only way you can know is if I tell you. Okay. So that's what revelation is. It's something hidden until the revealer opens it up so you can see it. So he gave special revelation to Noah. He gave special revelation to Abraham. And he also gave him promises of what was going to happen to him and his family after him. So the question is, what is this saved thing here? God saved some individual people in the Old Testament. Well, what did he save Noah from? Drowning. Okay, what did he save Abraham from? In the context there, really the only thing he saved him from at that moment was having a dead son, because he told him to offer up his son, and then he told him right at the very end there to not do it. And so he saved him from killing his son. But he also then gave him promises about the future. But the word saved in the Greek simply means to be delivered from a bad thing, whatever it is. You could be saved from, I don't care, I was made an appointment to go to the dentist because I had an abscess, but then I did something with some lemons and the abscess is gone. So I was saved from the infection. That word would be a fine use. That would be a fine use of that word in the Greek. Just delivered from some bad state, a bad situation. That's what saved in general means. Okay, but he did save Noah because he kept him alive where everybody else on the planet died. And it says here that he, according to Hebrews 11, it says, by faith Noah, being warned of God of these things not seen as yet, he was moved with fear, preparing an ark to the saving of his house, and by which he would condemn the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. And that's an important phrase, righteousness which is by faith. Righteousness meaning God declares you righteous. God says you are righteous because of your act of faith towards me, believing me, what I told you. Then he got saved. Abraham got saved by the same way. He believed the Lord, and it was counted to him as righteousness. He believed the Lord, that the Lord would still give him a son, still give him offspring, even though he was going to kill his son. David also, David says, "Blessed are they whose iniquities are forgiven." Oopsie, did it again. Blessed are those whose iniquities are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord will not impute sin. And so David himself also was saved. He was put into a position where God didn't impute sin to him. So then God could have that relationship with him. So if someone were to ask me, who went to heaven from the time of Adam, the time of the creation of Adam, until Jesus, I'd say, I don't know. Scripture speaks of these 3. It could have been more, could have been thousands more, could have been millions more. I don't know. I'm going by what it says here in the text. It may be that he let everybody else just go their way and didn't in fact save them. But he did save these 3. He says but he also gave revelation to all people. It was called what I call a non-salvific salvation. It's the salvation that doesn't save you, but it gives you enough information to know that you need to be saved. To me, this kind of revelation is the same thing as the doctor saying, oh, by the way, I've diagnosed you with stage 3 cancer. That diagnosis doesn't save you. It just says you got a problem and here's the solution for it. That's what this general revelation does. It lets them know that there's a problem, but there is also a solution if they want to go avail themselves of that solution. I'm going on pretty long here, aren't I, Dustin?
I mean, we've got till 11:30, so however long do you want to leave open
Okay,
for
I'll try to wrap it up
discussion?
here in 10 minutes.
We could always, I mean, I don't know how long this is. You know, we could always do a two-parter if you thought that was wise.
I'll just go a few more minutes and see where I am. So he gave general revelation. He gave us enough to know that God has divine power and divine nature, as was talked about in Torn last week. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. So I don't know all the details of what that means, but I do know that Paul says that all human beings who can clearly see things, and it's out there to be clearly seen, that there is a God, and this God has eternal power, and he has a God. He is a Godhead, which basically means that he's divine. These things are known by everybody. He's made that available to everybody, and he's given them enough to know that God has his standards of righteousness. Romans 1:32, who, knowing the judgment of God, which they commit such things, are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. So people know that God is righteous. They know he's divine, and they know that they're not. How do they know that? Well, he says right here, Romans 2:14 says, for when the Gentiles show the work of the law written in their hearts. The work of the law was primarily to make people know that there are standards, and it exposes that they can't follow them. The work of the law isn't the 10 Commandments. The work of the law isn't the Torah. The work of the law is what the law was meant to do, to show people that they were sinners. And they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts, in the meantime, are accusing or excusing. So it's essentially they have God put into all human beings the ability to know right and wrong, and he put into all human beings a conscience which can examine those things. So, and there's enough information, Paul says, to cause them to seek him, which I said before in Acts 17. There's enough out there that if they should seek the Lord, if they feel after him, and they might find him, but it doesn't save them. It just tells them that there is a problem, and then that if they want God's solution, he'll give them further revelation, not this general revelation, but he'll give them further revelation so that they can know that. Okay. From the time of Jesus on, I'm sorry, from Adam to Jesus, salvation was all through just individuals. I mean, how do I want to say this? He didn't work with groups of people until Moses and the Jews. Then he started working with them. But his plan for them wasn't a plan of salvation. The plan for them, and as I was talking with Annie about this just yesterday, in general, the Jewish religion, classical Judaism, was a religion that dealt overwhelmingly with this life, from the time we're born to the time we die, and it doesn't say hardly anything about an afterlife. Judaism is a religion about this life today. It doesn't really say much about that. It's a religion for today. It's a religion for this life. Is really what it is. Now, I'm not saying that people weren't saved, because David was saved and he lived under the law. So people did still get saved, but they were Jewish and they got saved because they believed God. They got saved by faith and not by their works of the law, as Paul points out later. So he was saving individuals, but he had a plan that was essentially promised through Abraham, and you got a hint of it back through Adam, that he was going to be saving a whole bunch more people. And this new salvation was justification by faith. And like I said, it was found in Abraham's promise. So that plan was to be fulfilled in Christ. And when at the cross, Christ broke down the law, the wall of separation between Jews and Gentiles. He said, okay, now I'm going to go work with the Gentiles en masse. Doesn't mean I'm going to save them all, but I'm going to work with them and I'm going to give them revelation too. How are they going to get that revelation now? The saving revelation? By having preachers, evangelists, YouTube videos, have the gospel go to them. They are savable by hearing, and that's what Paul says. That's faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So you have to hear the word of God and respond in faith after Jesus' resurrection. I personally believe, and we could talk about this next time. I'm not going to go into it right now. I personally believe that it's likely that the very first person who was ever in heaven was the thief on the cross. Because Jesus said to him, today you shall be with me in paradise. I think Old Testament saints didn't go to heaven. Old Testament saints didn't go to heaven because heaven wasn't open for business yet until Jesus died. Excuse me. And according to Hebrews, he had to cleanse heaven with his blood. And then after that, the Old Testament saints could go up there or go there. I don't know if it's up or down, but anyway. So the whole purpose of the Jewish religion, according to the New Testament, was simply to be a vehicle to prepare a people to bring the message of the gospel, to bring a lineage, to prepare the person who is going to be making the salvation possible, and bringing a set of standards that would show that he is a holy God. But Old Testament saints were only saved by faith. They were saved by trusting God that he was the only one who could save them, and they could not be saved even by the keeping of the law. As Peter says in his speech at the Council of Jerusalem, didn't help us. Well, what the law didn't help us. It didn't help us. It just didn't do that. So he preserved that line of people. He did it for several reasons. I can't go into it all now, but he did that, and so he sent his son to to do what needed to be done to actually save people, to get them to a different life, to deliver them from the problem that was in the world, which doesn't just mean heaven, to get them to heaven from hell. It was to get God from heaven into them. The primary purpose of the Christ's death and resurrection was to make it so that God could send the Holy Spirit to people who were born again. They had a new life in them that could live righteously, and the Spirit of God could live in them. So they would have a new life here and now, and then they could have a life in heaven, and the new heavens and new earth after that. So, okay, I think that will be a good stopping point. I still have quite a bit more stuff to talk about, but well, I'm out of time. So I suppose you can now turn off the recording, and then we'll see.